My fiancé announced, "I'll always put my mom first." Cool. So I packed my bags and moved in with his dad, who treated me better than he ever did. I'm Emily, 28 years old, female, and I can still hear his voice in my head, calm but sharp, like a knife gliding through my chest. I'll always put my mom first. That was my fiancé, Mark, 31, male, the man I'd been with for 4 years, the man I thought I was going to marry. And the woman he was talking about? His mom, Diane, 58, female. I should have seen it sooner. From the beginning, Diane treated me like some unworthy intruder. She'd joke about how no woman would ever love Mark like she did. She'd criticize how I cooked, how I dressed, even the way I sat. Once I showed up to Sunday dinner in a red dress and she laughed in front of everyone, saying, "Trying a little hard, aren't we? Mark likes women who don't flaunt it." And Mark, he laughed too. But I ignored the little cuts because I loved him. I told myself, she's just protective, she'll warm up eventually. And for a while, I even believed it. But every major decision we made, Diane was in the middle of it. What apartment we rented, what couch we bought, even which dog we adopted, because apparently her allergies meant we couldn't get one, though she didn't even live with us. Still, I held on, because Mark had this soft side, these moments where he'd pull me close and say he couldn't imagine life without me. He'd text me in the middle of the day just to say he missed me. He talked about kids, about building a life together. I wanted so badly to believe that was the real him, not the version who stiffened whenever his mom entered the room. The breaking point came during wedding planning. We'd just finished a meeting with the florist. Mark and I had been debating table arrangements when Diane interrupted, insisting everything had to be white roses, her favorite, not mine. I gently said I preferred lilies. Mark stayed silent. When I pushed again, Diane looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll learn that in this family what I say goes." I laughed nervously, waiting for Mark to back me up. Instead, he sighed, rubbed his temples, and muttered, "Mom's right." Something inside me cracked. I asked him later, in private, "Do you ever plan on putting me first?" He didn't even hesitate. He said it like it was obvious, like it was a fact carved into stone. "I'll always put my mom first." I felt my stomach drop. My hands went cold. I stared at the man I was supposed to marry and realized I was marrying into a two-person marriage where I'd never be more than a side character. So I did something that shocked even me. That night, I packed a suitcase, stuffed my essentials into the trunk of my car, and drove off. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but I kept repeating to myself, not another day, not another compromise. The crazy part? I didn't end up at a friend's house or a hotel. I ended up on the doorstep of Frank, 59, male, Mark's dad, Diane's ex-husband. And when he opened the door, confusion in his eyes but kindness in his voice, he simply said, "Come in, sweetheart, you look like hell." I didn't know it then, but that night was the start of everything unraveling. Frank, 59, male, wasn't what I expected. Mark never talked much about him, only threw out comments here and there, usually framed by Diane. "Your dad never had ambition. Your dad couldn't provide the way I needed. Your dad was lazy." But standing there in his doorway, I saw a man nothing like the shadow Diane painted. His house was modest, warm, wood floors with a little wear, a couple old photos hung crooked on the walls, a faint smell of coffee and sawdust. He wasn't flashy, but he wasn't broken either. When I stepped inside, suitcase dragging behind me, Frank didn't push for answers. He poured me tea, sat me down at his kitchen table, and just waited until I could breathe. And when I finally told him what happened, Mark's exact words, the way Diane had been running my life by proxy, Frank just let out a low whistle and shook his head. "Figures," he muttered, almost to himself. "She's still got her claws in him. Poor kid never had a chance." That word, kid. Mark was 31. But when Frank said it, I understood. Mark wasn't a partner. He was still Diane's little boy, trained to stay in line. I stayed that night. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured out my next move. But the strangest thing happened. Frank made me feel safe. Not in a romantic way, at least not yet, but in the sense that he listened without trying to fix me, respected my choices without needing control. He let me have silence when I needed it. That silence felt like oxygen after years of suffocating under Diane's running commentary. The next morning, Mark blew up my phone. Missed calls, texts that swung from desperate to furious. Where are you? Then, you're overreacting. Then, Mom didn't mean it that way. Then, don't do this to us. And finally, the kicker. Dad's house? Seriously? That's low, Emily. My hands shook reading that. He knew exactly where I was, and instead of asking if I was okay, he went straight to outrage. Like my existence was some betrayal, some act against him. When I didn't respond, Diane herself texted me. Grow up. Marriage is about compromise. You'll never find someone who loves you like Mark does. Stop being dramatic. I almost threw my phone at the wall. The audacity of that woman, acting like I hadn't spent 4 years compromising every little piece of myself for her approval. Frank noticed my expression and asked gently, "You want me to tell him to back off?" That's when something hit me. Frank knew what it was like. He had lived under Diane's reign, too. He'd been chewed up by her control, discarded when he didn't fit her mold. And instead of bitterness, he carried this quiet strength, like surviving her had made him solid in a way Mark never would be. That night, I caught myself staring at the old family photo on Frank's mantle. Mark as a little boy, maybe 6 or 7, sitting on Frank's shoulders at the beach. They looked so happy. Before Diane hardened everything. I didn't realize I was crying until Frank came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. You deserved better, Emily, he said quietly. Mark should have been that for you. Not me having to say it now. And that was the first night I realized something dangerous. Frank was treating me with more care, more tenderness than Mark ever had. The third day at Frank's, I woke up to the smell of bacon. For a second, I panicked, thinking Diane had somehow tracked me down. But when I walked into the kitchen, it was just Frank, humming off-key to some old Eagles song, wearing a faded t-shirt with grease stains. Hope you don't mind, he said, sliding a plate toward me. I usually make too much, habit from when Mark was little. I almost laughed. Mark hadn't cooked me breakfast in 4 years. If I wanted food, I made it. If I wanted comfort, I begged for scraps. And here was Frank, treating me better without even trying. That morning, I finally answered one of Mark's calls. His voice came through sharp, like a man rehearsing a speech. Emily, you're humiliating me. People are asking questions. Mom's devastated. You can't just run off to my dad's house like some teenager throwing a tantrum. I swallowed my anger. Mark, you told me you'd always put your mom first. What's left for me in that? His tone cracked, desperate now. You're twisting my words. You knew what I meant. Family is important. She's done everything for me. Everything for you, Mark. Not for us. Not for me. There was silence. Then, like a switch flipping, his voice turned venomous. You sound just like my dad. Weak. Always playing the victim. Maybe you two deserve each other. I hung up before he could spit more poison. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That night, Diane herself showed up. No warning. Just the sound of tires screeching into Frank's driveway, followed by her pounding on the door. Emily, open this door right now. You think you can crawl to my ex-husband and turn him against his own son? Her voice was shrill enough to rattle the windows. Frank went to the door, calm as stone, and cracked it open just enough. Go home, Diane. I peeked around the corner. Diane's face was flushed red, hair wild, like she hadn't slept in days. You always did love stealing things from me, Frank. Now you want her too? Pathetic. Frank didn't flinch. The only thing I ever wanted was for Mark to be his own man. You made sure that never happened. The look Diane gave him could have cut through steel. And then she turned it on me. You think this is love? Living in my leftovers? Don't forget who made Mark into the man you fell for. Without me, he's nothing. And without him, you'll be nothing too. I froze. But Frank's voice rose, firm this time. Leave before I call the cops. She spat something under her breath, stormed back to her car, and tore out of the driveway so fast gravel flew against the siding. I thought I'd collapse after that, but Frank just poured me another cup of tea like nothing had happened. My hands were trembling as I gripped the mug. She's not going to stop, I whispered. I know, Frank said simply. But I've been through her storms before. You'll be fine here. And maybe it was reckless, maybe it was grief, but when I looked at Frank in that moment, steady, unshaken, I realized something terrifying. I felt safer in his house, in his presence, than I had in all the years with Mark. That night, lying awake in Frank's guest room, I stared at the ceiling and admitted the truth to myself. Leaving Mark wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was that I wasn't sure I wanted him back. The next few days felt like living under siege. Mark's texts didn't stop, paragraphs of emotional whiplash. 1 minute. Please, I'll do better. Just come home. The next. You're disgusting for staying with my dad. I ignored most of them, but every buzz of my phone knotted my stomach tighter. Then came the public ambush. I was leaving the grocery store one evening, arms full of bags, when I heard my name screeched across the parking lot. Diane. And beside her, Mark. Heads turned as Diane marched toward me like a general, Mark trailing close behind. There she is, the runaway bride, she yelled, loud enough for the whole damn parking lot to hear. I froze. People were staring. Some even pulled out their phones. Mom, please, Mark tried, but Diane shoved him aside. She jabbed a finger at me, eyes blazing. You think you can humiliate my son? Run off to shack up with his father? Do you have any idea what people are saying? The words shack up echoed in the air like poison. My face went hot. I glanced around. Some strangers were whispering, others smirking. Diane, stop, I said, voice shaking. This isn't your life. It's mine. That's when Mark exploded. He grabbed one of my grocery bags, yanked it out of my arms, and hurled it across the pavement. Cans rolled under cars. A carton of eggs burst, splattering yellow across the asphalt. Look what you're doing to us, he screamed, his face twisted, spit flying. You ruined everything. You're making me into a joke. I'd never seen him like that before. People were backing away now, one woman whispering into her phone, probably calling the cops. My chest tightened, panic rising, but then a truck pulled up, horn blaring. Frank. He swung out of the cab, eyes locked on Mark, voice calm but deadly. Pick up her groceries, now. Mark froze. For the first time, he looked small, like a boy caught misbehaving. But Diane wasn't having it. Oh, please, Frank. You think you can play hero? You couldn't keep a wife, and now you want my son's fiancé? Frank didn't even blink. Better to lose a wife than lose your soul. Then he turned to me, voice soft. Get in the truck, Emily. I didn't hesitate. I climbed in, hands shaking so badly I could barely shut the door. Through the window, I saw Mark kick one of the busted egg cartons, fury etched across his face. The ride back was silent for a while, my pulse still pounding. Finally, Frank said, She'll burn down everything to keep control. That's who she is. I swallowed hard, staring at the passing lights. Then maybe it's time someone taught her what it feels like to lose. The words slipped out before I could think. But once they were in the air, I knew I meant them. That was the moment the idea of revenge stopped being fantasy and started taking shape. Update. Wow, okay. I didn't expect this to blow up like it did. I've been reading through the comments and DMs, and honestly, y'all are wild. Some of you said, girl, marry the dad and send them both an invite. Others told me to run for my life before Mark ends up on the evening news. And a surprising number of you just want to know if Frank is hot. Yes, I saw those comments. Y'all are shameless. And I'm not answering. Yet. So the big news. That public meltdown in the grocery store parking lot? It went viral. Someone posted a video on Facebook, Mark screaming, Diane calling me a runaway bride, eggs splattered everywhere. It's already made its way through our whole town. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing with messages from old coworkers, mutual friends, even my cousin in another state who was like, is this you? Mark texted me after the video spread. He went full victim mode, of course. You embarrassed me. How could you make me look like that in front of everyone? Like I hurled my own groceries and screamed at myself. Diane also left me a voicemail that sounded like she was choking on rage. You'll regret this, Emily. You think you've won? Just wait. That's literally what she said, like some soap opera villain. Meanwhile, Frank has been a rock. He didn't even flinch when the cops showed up at his place that night. Someone at the parking lot must have reported the scene. He calmly explained that his ex-wife and son were harassing me, and the officers actually told Diane to back off. Mark too. Watching Diane's face as she realized she couldn't sweet-talk the cops, that was the first time I felt the tiniest spark of satisfaction in weeks. But here's where things shift. I've been sitting in Frank's guest room scrolling through that video over and over, and something inside me is hardening. Diane thrives on control, on public image. She thought she could humiliate me in broad daylight and make me crawl back. Instead, she humiliated herself. And now, I'm thinking maybe it's time to stop playing defense. Some of y'all said revenge should be sweet, not petty. I get that now. I don't just want to run away and lick my wounds. I want Diane to feel the sting of being powerless. I want Mark to finally see her for what she is, and maybe, just maybe, I already know how to do it. Stay tuned. The idea came to me the night after the parking lot scene while scrolling through that viral video for the 100th time. Diane screaming, Mark thrashing like a toddler. It was ugly, raw, humiliating. And yet, I knew Diane wouldn't stop. She'd twist the narrative, spin herself as the victim, and Mark would follow suit. But here's the thing. Diane's world runs on appearances. She feeds on reputation, on being the matriarch everyone respects, on making sure the spotlight stays exactly where she wants it. If you take that away from her, she crumbles. I told Frank what I was thinking. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and gave me this look like, "Careful what fire you're playing with, kid." "She's already spiraling," he said. "If you push her, she'll go nuclear." "Exactly," I said. "And this time I want her to burn herself down." So I started small. I reached out to a couple of women I'd met through Mark's work events, the wives of his coworkers. Diane had bragged endlessly at those dinners, dropping passive-aggressive comments about how I should learn from her grace. I messaged them links to the video. Most had already seen it. One wrote back, "That's the woman who lectured me about setting an example for my daughter?" Yikes. The whispers started spreading. I didn't even have to push. It was like people had been waiting for Diane to show her cracks. Meanwhile, Mark was unraveling. He showed up at Frank's house one night, pounding on the door until his fists left smudges. "Dad, you can't do this! She's mine!" he screamed. Frank didn't open the door. I watched from the upstairs window as Mark's voice cracked, his whole body shaking. He looked less like a man and more like a scared boy screaming for someone to fix things. Eventually, he collapsed against the porch railing, sobbing so loud the neighbors turned on their lights. Frank finally stepped outside, not to comfort him, but to tell him, quietly and firmly, "Go home, son." The next day, I set the real plan in motion. I took Diane's own tactic, public spectacle, and turned it against her. See, Diane had been bragging for months about hosting an engagement brunch at her country club, a chance to parade me around like some prize she'd polished up herself. The invites had already gone out before I left Mark. She never canceled it. So I showed up, alone. The room fell silent when I walked in. Diane's smile froze on her face, Mark standing at her side like a puppet missing its strings. I didn't say a word at first. I just walked straight to the table at the front where the engagement photos were displayed. Me and Mark, smiling like fools. And then I picked up the biggest framed one, held it for everyone to see, and dropped it on the floor. Glass shattered across the carpet. The gasp that went through the room was delicious. Diane lurched forward, hissing, "What the hell are you doing?" I smiled, freeing myself. And before she could stop me, I turned and walked out. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Phones were already out. Diane's carefully constructed facade, perfect hostess, perfect mother, perfect family, was crumbling right there in the place she valued most. When I got back to Frank's, my hands were still shaking, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. He just raised an eyebrow and said, "You really did it, huh?" "Yeah," I whispered, half terrified, half exhilarated. "And she's not going to recover from this one." The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Screenshots flooded in from people I barely talked to anymore. Posts from Diane's Facebook, a mess of half-truths and flat-out lies. She claimed I'd lost my mind, that I'd become dangerously obsessed with destroying her family, that poor Mark was heartbroken and unsafe. She even posted a photo of the broken engagement picture from the brunch, captioned, "Pray for my son during this difficult time. Some people can't handle rejection without violence." Violence. She made it sound like I'd attacked them with the frame instead of dropping a photo on the ground. Mark piled on. His posts read like a teenager after his first breakup. Lyrics, dramatic quotes, one that literally said, "When love turns toxic, all you can do is walk away." Except, I was the one who walked, and he was still lurking outside Frank's house 2 nights later, headlights off, sitting in his car across the street like some stalker in a bad Lifetime movie. Frank confronted him, stepped outside with a flashlight, knocked on the window. Mark startled like a kid caught sneaking a cigarette. "Dad, I just need to talk to her, he stammered. Frank's voice was calm but sharp. Emily doesn't owe you anything. Leave. Now. Mark slammed his hands against the steering wheel, face twisted. You always take everyone else's side. First Mom's, now hers. Why can't you just be on my side for once? And then, this broke something in me. He started crying. Not the angry sobbing from before, but broken, guttural sobs. Frank just stood there, silent. And eventually Mark drove off, tires squealing. The next day, Diane upped the ante. She showed up at my workplace, walked right into the lobby like she owned the place, demanded to speak to HR, claimed I was harassing her family, that I was mentally unstable, and should be monitored before something tragic happens. By the time my manager called me into the office, my stomach was ice. But here's the twist. My manager already knew the whole backstory. She'd seen the viral video. She'd seen the brunch photos making the rounds online. She made herself look unhinged, not you, my manager told me, shaking her head. Don't worry, we're not entertaining her nonsense. That tiny victory felt huge. For the first time, Diane's grip wasn't working, but I should have known she wouldn't stop there. That night, Frank and I were sitting on his porch when headlights swung into the driveway. A car door slammed, and before we could react, Diane stormed out with Mark right behind her. You think you've won? She shrieked, pointing at me. You won't break up this family, not again. Her voice cracked, rage spilling over into something wild, unhinged. She grabbed the nearest flower pot off the porch and hurled it at the steps, where it shattered into a spray of dirt and ceramic shards. Mark tried to hold her back, but she shook him off. If you don't leave her, Mark, she screamed, eyes blazing at him, you'll lose me forever. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. The ultimatum hung in the air like a curse. Mark's face crumpled, torn in two, and all I could think was, this is the family I almost married into. Frank stepped forward, voice low but iron strong. That's enough. Both of you, off my property. Now. They left, tires spitting gravel, Diane's scream echoing into the night. But I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as I stood there, heart pounding, Frank touched my arm and whispered, You've rattled her, Emily. But people like Diane, they don't go down easy. He was right, and I could feel it. Something bigger was coming. Update 2. Y'all, I seriously don't even know where to start. First off, thank you. I've been reading through your comments again, and it's honestly been keeping me sane. A lot of you said Diane sounded like she was about 2 meltdowns away from throwing a chair through a window. Well, congrats, you basically called it. She's not quite at the chair stage, but the flower pot didn't survive. Yes, you read that right. She came to Frank's porch middle of the night, screaming like a banshee, grabbed a ceramic flower pot, and smashed it into pieces. Dirt everywhere. I was standing right there, watching this grown woman implode like a reality TV contestant on week 2. And the worst part? Mark was right beside her. He didn't stop her. He didn't calm her down. He just looked torn, like a kid being forced to pick which parent he loves more. Diane even gave him an ultimatum, literally screamed, If you don't leave her, you'll lose me forever. Can you imagine your future mother-in-law shrieking that on your fiancé's porch while the neighbors peek through their blinds? Yeah, that's my life now. A bunch of you told me, document everything, record her, protect yourself. Don't worry, I started. Frank actually dug out this old security camera system he'd installed years ago but never bothered to use. We got it up and running, and guess what? We caught the whole flower pot scene on video. If Diane tries to spin the story again, I've got receipts this time. Some of you also keep joking about just marry Frank instead. Look, I get it. He's been amazing. Rock solid, protective without being controlling, actually listens when I talk. The contrast between him and Mark is brutal, honestly. I don't even know what that means for me yet. But I'll tell you this. If I had to choose which man in this family actually treated me with respect, it's not the one I was wearing a ring for. Anyway, things feel like they're hitting some kind of breaking point. Diane's gone from subtle digs to full-blown public meltdowns. Mark's gone from sulking texts to stalking outside the house. And me? I'm tired of reacting. I want to end this. So yeah, buckle up, because the next move is mine. The next morning, I stared at Frank's laptop, replaying the porch footage over and over. Diane's face twisted with rage. Mark's useless attempts to restrain her, the flower pot exploding into shards on the steps. It was all there. "This," I whispered, "is how she finally loses." Frank leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me carefully. "You sure you want to put this out there? Once you do, there's no taking it back." But that was the thing. Diane had been playing this game publicly all along. The Facebook posts, the parking lot scene, the brunch meltdown. She built her identity on her image, and now I had the perfect mirror to show people who she really was. So I uploaded it. Not to some anonymous burner, not hidden in a corner of the internet. I posted it myself, on my own account, captioned simply, "This is what I left. This is who tried to call me unstable." Within an hour, it spread like wildfire. The same people who'd whispered behind my back at Diane's brunch were now sharing it, commenting things like, "So this is the woman who lectures us about family values?" And, "I always thought she was unhinged. Now it's on camera." Mark texted me within minutes. "Delete it. Now." Then, "You're ruining her life. You're ruining our life." And finally, "I swear, Emily, if you don't take that down, I'll make you regret it." The threat didn't scare me. It confirmed I'd hit exactly where it hurt. By that evening, Diane's perfect circle of country club friends had fractured. One even DM'd me, "Thank you for posting this. She's bullied women here for years. People needed to see." But the victory came with chaos. Around midnight, Mark showed up again. This time, he didn't stay in the car. He stormed up the porch, pounding on the door so hard the glass rattled. "Open the damn door, Emily," he roared. "How dare you do this to my mom?" Frank moved faster than I'd ever seen him. He flung the door open just enough to block Mark's path, his voice like steel. "You step 1 foot inside, son, and I'll have you arrested." Mark's face crumpled, wild-eyed. He wasn't the calm, collected man I once thought I knew. He was frantic, desperate, broken. "Dad, please, don't let her do this. Don't let her destroy us." And then he turned those eyes on me, pleading, "Emily, I love you. Please, just come home. We can fix this." For a split second, I saw the boy in him, the one crushed between Diane's claws and his own weakness. But then I remembered every time he laughed when Diane cut me down. Every time he stood silent while she took pieces of me. Every time he chose her, not me. I shook my head. "No, Mark. You don't love me. You love your mother, and I won't compete with her anymore." Frank closed the door. The last thing I heard was Mark's scream, raw and guttural, before his car peeled away into the night. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. For the first time, I realized the power had shifted. Diane was crumbling. Mark was unraveling. And me? I was finally free. But Frank was right. People like Diane don't go down easy. Zai, and I had no idea just how far she was about to go. It happened 3 days after I posted the video. Frank and I were sitting in the living room, half watching some old Western, when headlights suddenly swept across the walls. Tires crunched on the gravel. My stomach sank. I already knew. By the time Frank stood, the front door was shaking in its frame from Diane's pounding. Her voice tore through the night. "Open this door! You think you can destroy me? I made this family. You are nothing without me." Frank didn't move to open it this time. He just shook his head and muttered, "She's finally lost it." Then, glass shattered. Diane had thrown a brick through the front window. Screams from outside, Mark's voice breaking, "Mom, stop! Please, stop!" Frank rushed forward, holding me back. "Stay here." I couldn't stay. I had to see it. I stepped into the doorway just as Diane charged up the porch. Hair wild, eyes burning like she was possessed. Mark tried to grab her, but she shoved him so hard he stumbled into the railing. "You ruined him!" she shrieked, jabbing her finger toward me. "You ruined everything!" And then she lunged, actually lunged, like she meant to drag me down by my hair. Frank caught her mid-swing, holding her back with a strength I didn't know he still had. Mark dropped to his knees right there on the porch, sobbing into his hands. "Make it stop, Dad. Please. Make her stop." Neighbors were already gathering, phones out, lights flicking on across the street. And then, like salvation, the red and blue glow painted the night. Someone had called the cops. When the officers pulled Diane off the porch, she was still spitting venom, screaming that I was a homewrecker and Frank was a traitor. Mark was crumpled on the steps, a broken man, while his mother was dragged, kicking and cursing into the back of a squad car. And me? I stood there, clutching Frank's arm, watching it all unfold. My body was shaking, but not from fear this time. From closure. The police took Diane in for disorderly conduct, property damage, trespassing. Nothing huge, but enough. Enough to stain her perfect reputation forever. Enough to make sure every whisper in town wasn't about me, but about her. Later that night, when the chaos had quieted, Frank and I sat on the porch surrounded by shards of glass and dirt from the shattered flower pot. He handed me a beer, clinked the neck of his bottle against mine, and said quietly, "Well, guess you don't need white roses at your wedding after all." I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't bitter. It was real. Mark hasn't called since that night. I think he finally saw the truth, that he'll never be free until he chooses to step out of Diane's shadow. But that's not my battle anymore. Mine's over, and I won. Because in the end, Diane destroyed herself. All I had to do was stop standing in her shadow and let the world see her in the light. And as I sat there on Frank's porch, wrapped in his quiet strength, I realized something simple but powerful. Mark told me he'd always put his mom first, so I put myself first, and it saved me.